If you're neglecting your shadow, you are stalling your self-concept transformation. Let's uncover why embracing the darkest parts of your psyche is the key to becoming your most empowered self, to becoming the version of you that you desire to be. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena. I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I support you in bridging the gap between who you currently are or perceive yourself to be and who you desire to be or become. Let's start by putting into context how big of a deal it is to transform your self-concept. Right? It's not just practice. You're becoming a completely new version of yourself. That's a big freaking deal. That's a rebirth. That means it's the death of your past self and the integration and embodiment of a new version of self. It's a bit like a massive software update. An update of this size takes time, and it includes a review of all the bugs. In other words, before you get to embody something new, you need to dismantle what's there. You need to review and potentially dismantle what's present at the moment. Okay, so how does your shadow play into this? Now, when I speak of your shadow, I am speaking about the unconscious part of your psyche. And the subconscious is incredibly vast, it's incredibly complex. It doesn't work through words, it operates by feeling. To illustrate this, I often like saying you had a subconscious as a baby, but you didn't have conscious thought. You just felt things. You just perceived things. You didn't have the language or the words yet. Now, when it comes your shadow as a part of your subconscious, that's everything that's hidden, that's neglected, abandoned, sometimes rejected. Everything that has been pushed down because it's been perceived as something to be ashamed of or something that we don't want to own or have. It's the parts of yourself that you don't want others to see. It's the things that you find difficult to accept or that you silently judge. Now, of course, that's easier said than done. If I just tell you to love and integrate and own every part of yourself that you feel judgment towards, you feel judgment towards these parts for a reason. So whilst the concept might sound simple, in practice it's not. But now, why is this important? Why do you even need to do shadow work if you want to change your self-concept? Because you might argue, but the reason I want to change my self-concept is because I don't like what's there, because I do want to change. But if that is your sole motivation, you'll be at war with yourself, and that never works. In order to change anything, you need to accept what is before you can take any other steps. I recently did a video about my journey towards loving my body and my whole journey of healing my body image and loving and changing myself through that. So I'm going to link that for you below, but I essentially tried to hate myself into loving myself. But I only began to see the changes that I wanted to see in my physical appearance when I loved it all as it was and then began to change it from there. The second reason is that your shadow includes the things that you suppress. And suppression means automatic resistance. And what you resist will always persist. Through your resistance, you turn it into a really big problem. Now, the thing with suppressing things into your shadow is that they are completely unconscious. For the most part, at least. So you're not necessarily aware that you're even suppressing it in the first place. That is until you really tune into your body and you feel that there's a resistance, but you maybe don't know where to place it or what to do with it, or maybe you don't want to feel it because who wants to feel that? It's not a pleasant sensation. And thirdly, changing your self-concept is not about fixing you. It's not about fixing anything. It's not about changing who you are. It's about changing how you show up. How embodied you are, how confident you are, how much you love yourself. It's less a process of adding a new identity and more a process of releasing what's not you, peeling off the layers until you get to the core of who you truly are. So it's about changing how you see and carry yourself. It's not about changing what you perceive as flaws or darkness or traits to judge, because maybe it's not a flaw at all. Maybe it's what makes you so magnificent. So you can't change your self-concept if you're at war with your current one. And because the topic of subconscious reprogramming and subconscious mastery is so vast, I actually made a free masterclass a while back. You can get the replay, which is linked below. It's called Beneath the Surface, and it goes into mastering your subconscious and mastering your shadow. and all of the pieces that I'm talking about in this video right here in a lot more depth. So let's talk shadow work. And the big thing that I want to distinguish here is doing shadow work through a lens of awareness. I did a video about awareness last week versus a lens of integration. And honestly, many people do shadow work the wrong way. I say the wrong way, but what I mean is in a very limited or surface level way. And I see this all the time when people come into my program, Recreate Yourself, because they usually have done some work on their subconscious beliefs. They have attempted to face their shadow. They maybe have done that in some ways, but it's very limited, and they haven't actually ever gone as deep as they needed to go in order to really transform their identity, transform their self-concept, and become who they wanted to become. It's been just scratching the surface of their subconscious rather than going all the way into the core. And the two mistakes that people make here is that they either try and fix their shadow. So they go into it from the perspective of, I want to get rid of this. And we've already established this is not a good entry point. This is not a good way to go into it. Or they do it purely through the awareness route, the awareness path. So they maybe gain a lot of awareness about their shadows, the parts of themselves that they judge, what they don't like about themselves, but they either resist that because of how much discomfort it causes, especially when you're just sitting there with it by yourself and it doesn't lead to resolution, or they have these realizations, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what the next step is. And that makes sense because it is incredibly difficult to do anything beyond awareness if you don't have the right tools, the right process, and the right container and support system. It's hard. Often you don't know what to do with the parts that you don't like. And people can tell you to love them, but you're like, how do you even do that? You can tell yourself, or you can tell these parts of yourself, I love you, but do you mean it? And it's very uncomfortable to be with it. There's a lot of discomfort you'll need to embrace. In Recreate Yourself, the part where we really work with the shadow and the subconscious tends to be the most profound part, but it's the hardest in the moment for the majority of my clients. It's where everything gets opened up in order to heal it, but that can be painful. It's a bit like when you have surgery. You're going to be opened, and then you have a wound, and that wound needs to be patched back up. And that's painful. That's painful even after the surgery itself is over. I believe that the reason my clients see these results is because of the deep support that they get, but also because of the unique way that I teach them to deal with and integrate their shadows. But it's still a challenging process for anyone because it makes you face everything that you don't want to face. Everything that you've created protective mechanisms around. All the sticky and uncomfortable emotions. But there is such a huge benefit to integrating your shadow. And it's why a lot of people want to change their self-concept in the first place, because ultimately it makes you feel more whole. Because for most people, their consciousness is incredibly fragmented through all the experiences that they've made. And when your consciousness is fragmented, you can't feel fully whole. You can't be fully embodied. It's like your system is confused because there's so many conflicting states and emotions going on. And of course, we're all multifaceted beings. We have a lot of aspects to ourselves, each of us, but that confusion can create an inner conflict that runs so deep that it blocks you from becoming who you want to be. It blocks the full potential of who you can be. And what's really cool is that when you integrate your shadow properly, your self-concept naturally already changes. As I said in Recreate Yourself, the shadow work, shadow integration process is some of the biggest aspects of the container. And it's only at the very end of the program that we even do the conscious embodiment of who you want to be. Because it's not really necessary to do it. Or at least it's not really necessary to spend so much time and energy on actively embodying beliefs or states when you're in your most whole, authentic, truest essence. And that's also when anything you choose to embody lasts, because it integrates and lands more deeply in your system and in your being, because there's nothing fighting it. Through appropriate shadow integration, your self-concept will have changed already through the wholeness that you've embraced and stepped into and become. Let me know how you feel about this. How do you feel about facing your shadow? What comes up for you? Have you also tried to do some shadow work and began to hit a wall like so many people do? Next week, we're gonna dive deeper into transforming your self-concept in a deep and sustainable way versus from a surface level perspective. I spoke to this a little bit in this video, but I wanna do a whole deep dive so you get a lot more context and know what to do to see real change in your self-identity. Now see you next week.